You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
They always tell you there's a catch, a compromise, an asterisk. Sprite Zero Sugar? It's different. It's the lemon lime flavored refreshment you want with zero sugar. This is Sprite Zero Sugar. Obey your thirst.
Last year, a South African preacher named Joshua Malakela appeared on a YouTube video program and claimed he had been visited by Jesus Christ in a vision, during which Jesus revealed to him the actual date for his second coming, when those faithful to him would be taken up to heaven in what is known as the rapture.
He says to me, on the 23rd and the 24th of September, 2025, I will come to take my church.
This prediction went viral on social media, especially on TikTok, where if you were unlucky enough to have this become part of your algorithm, you were inundated with so-called rapture talk posts. These ran the gamut. There were plenty of memes mocking the prediction.
Get ready with me to get raptured. So obviously I want to look really good for God, so we're going to go in first with...
Such as a skit in which someone goes to collect on a bet that the rapture wouldn't happen, finds a pile of clothes on the ground, and is relieved they don't have to pay up.
And I am heading over to my friend's house to collect $200 because he said the rapture was going to happen and bet me $200. So let's go get this $200. Jimmy? Holy shit. Oh man. The good thing is I don't have $200, so solution. Wait a minute. Free house.
Then there were posts, both genuine and performative, of Christians who decided to put their faith in this guy for no real reason other than that they wanted to believe, weeping and talking about preparing for their translation to heaven, such as by setting up automatic pet feeders for the animals they would leave behind, and advising those who would be left behind to start prepping survival kits.
And I think it's really hitting me that we are going home. And I am so sad for those who are not going with us.
Today is the day! Let's go! We made it!
There have even been reports of these believers quitting their jobs, which makes sense, and cashing out savings and selling their cars and homes, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially if they think they're not even going to get to bring their clothing with them.
Hey, to the person who sold me their car on September 21st, if this is September 24th and the rapture didn't happen, you're not getting your car back.
Then on the day, when, as you might already have figured out, nothing happened, some users uploaded years-old Christian video productions made to depict imagined rapture scenarios like crashing cars and panic in the streets, as if they were footage of actual events, hoaxes for clicks.
I have no idea what's going on right now. Everyone's freaking out. I'm freaking out. Officer, some lady, her kid disappeared. Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is crazy. Apparently a bunch of people just disappeared here on this street. This guy's wife is gone.
In the end, Malakela was proven wrong, but he didn't just admit it and offer a mea culpa. No, he doubled down, amending his prediction and claiming the error was due to some confusion between the Gregorian calendar and the Julian calendar, and designating a date in October instead.
I'm 1,000,000,000% sure that the rapture is going to happen on the 23rd and the 24th of September 2025. But when you cross over straight from this Feast of Trumpets to our Gregorian calendar, it will put you on the 7th and the 8th October.
Of course, the rapture didn't happen then either because, of course, the rapture isn't real. As I've spoken about before in a patron exclusive about the Armageddon lobby, the rapture is an idea that was made up in the early 19th century by a guy named John Nelson Darby. Bible scholars do not consider it to be clearly supported by scriptures. However, the notion of the rapture, that the faithful will be taken up to heaven at the second coming of Christ, sparing them the struggles of living through the Great Tribulation period, is just one newer wrinkle in Christian apocalypticism, a notion more precisely known as premillennial dispensationalism, a view popularized by a widely used Bible in the 20th century, the Scofield Study Bible, but still just one view of many in Christian eschatology, the theology having to do with the end of the world, or Doomsday. While many believe in the rapture, the rise of an antichrist, and a tumultuous tribulation period, many others, both Catholic and Protestant, do not. Nevertheless, most Christians do recognize several events as milestones of the end times: the second coming of Christ, the millennium, 1,000 years during which Jesus and God will rule the world, the final judgment, and the resurrection of the dead. Joshua Malakela's viral movement and belief in an imminent rapture kicking off a world-ending apocalypse is what would be called a millenarian movement or belief, taking its name from the millennium, but often used specifically to describe any group that foresees a radical and imminent transformation of society that will lead to a perfect or utopian paradise. Millenarian beliefs can arise from any religion, or may even be secular. They are the bread and butter of cults. But there is no belief system more conducive to millenarian belief, or more likely to cause social unrest because of it, than Christianity. And in these cases, it's more accurate to call these messianic movements millennialist rather than millenarian. Even though the Gospel of Matthew states that, quote, "about that day and hour no one knows," end quote, there have been many examples of Christian believers making failed predictions about the second coming of Christ. Several 2nd and 3rd century church fathers predicted Jesus' return in the year 500 CE, based on beliefs about when the creation of the world occurred and prophecies about how much time would pass before its destruction. Or in one case, based on a belief that the time of the second coming had been encrypted into the numbers given for the dimensions of Noah's Ark in Genesis. Obviously, all of them, Hippolytus of Rome and Sextus Julius Africanus, though they did not live long enough to learn their errors. 1666 was also a favorite year for the end of the world, given its foreboding 666 numbering. Specifically, the Fifth Monarchists, an English Protestant sect and nonconformist movement, believed the end of Daniel's prophesied 4 kingdoms was nigh in that year. Daniel's 4 kingdoms is a favorite prophecy for millennialist interpretations, since it speaks of 4 kingdoms to come in world history, characterized by minerals, gold, silver, bronze, and iron mixed with clay, as well as symbolically represented by chimeric animals, a winged lion, a bear, a winged 4-headed leopard, and a beast with 10 horns and iron teeth. Millennialist conspiracy nuts can imagine just about any global power or time period as being represented in this imagery, and can therefore use it to justify endless predictions. The Fifth Monarchists claimed that the 4th kingdom would come to an end with the Stuart dynasty, so several of them conspired in the regicide of Charles I. Thereafter, they imagined that the saints, aka themselves, would rule until the second coming in 1666. So they ended up at odds with both Cromwell's protectorate and the eventual Stuart restoration, under which monarchy most were executed or imprisoned. And England did not have a monopoly on failed millennialist predictions. Russian Orthodox Christians calculated that, according to the Byzantine calendar, the 7th millennium since the creation of the world would come to an end in the year 1492, and that this also meant the end of this world. The belief was so prominent, so widespread, that the Russian Orthodox Church refused to calculate the dates for Easter beyond 1491. Their error would eventually lead to the Russian Orthodox belief that such calculations for the prediction of the end of the world are heretical. But in one way, their prediction that in 1492 one world would come to an end and a new world would begin was bang on, as that was the year when the New World was reached by European explorers. And it was in this new world, and in the United States specifically, that millennialist belief and erroneous predictions of the end times would become almost a foundational aspect of the culture. This is Historical Blindness. I'm Nathaniel Lloyd, and I find it so very ironic that many of the same folks who will believe the end of the world is nigh when they hear even some random religious nut saying it on YouTube will refuse to believe climate scientists who say that man-made climate change poses an existential threat to the world. I guess the real problem is that they all welcome the end of days. Thanks for joining me for Doomsday Deferred, the failed predictions of American millennialism. Before we continue the episode, I want to thank all my patrons. Patrons of the show get access to an exclusive RSS feed with ad-free versions of the show, early release of episodes, teasers, and exclusive minisodes between every main release, making this a weekly podcast for patrons on Patreon. If you hear minisodes and think they're little blurbs or insubstantial sound bites, think again. They're fully researched and produced episodes, anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes long, and they tie in with the main episode topics. And they even sometimes fill in the gaps and tell the rest of the story that my main episode didn't have time to tell. For example, after my series on the moral panics of the 80s, Stranger Danger and Satanic Panic, I released minisodes throughout my December hiatus about some foundational legends of QAnon, the Finders Cult, and the Franklin Cover-Up that originated in those panics. And after my season premiere on global sacred alignments, I released a minisode all about dowsing or water witching, which had come up briefly in the main episode as it relates to divining the location of ley lines. For listeners who are interested, I also sell these exclusive minisodes for just $3 a pop. So head over to patreon.com/historicalblindness and consider purchasing the occasional blind spot minisode that interests you, or supporting the podcast for as little as $1 a month. Now, let's continue the episode. Welcome to Historical Blindness. When I say millennialist belief was foundational in American culture, I mean that, like much of our culture, it was brought over from the Old World. The American colonies drew religious dissidents across the Atlantic from the very start. Think of the Pilgrims, more accurately known as separatists, who sought greater religious liberty in the Americas. In the same way, many of the early and most prominent millennialist groups in the Americas had their start in the Old World before their leaders brought them to American shores. One example is the Shakers, or Shaking Quakers, so called for the convulsive ecstasies they entered during worship. The group had separated in 1747 England from the Society of Friends, called the Quakers in mockery because they were taught to tremble fearfully before God. They became known as the United Society of Believers in Christ's Second Appearing, for they felt strongly that the kingdom of God was at hand. The group transformed within a decade or so under the leadership of Ann Lee, who taught a radical doctrine of gender equality, celibacy, and a coming utopia. Lee, who is the subject of a major new motion picture that looks interesting, moved her millennialist sect to New York, where she taught an unusual doctrine that God was androgynous or non-binary when it came to gender identity. Her followers believed that she was herself the second coming of Christ, and she led her Shakers in a broad missionary campaign across New England, where they were often met with violence. Ann Lee died as a result of some of this violence. But her sect lived on into the 19th century when they experienced a period of supposed visionary experiences called the Era of Manifestations. The group survived into the 20th century, never seeing the establishment of the utopia their mother Anne promised. A contemporary of Ann Lee, George Rapp, a German preacher and self-proclaimed prophet who shared some beliefs with the Shakers but also took on a more mystical aspect through his interest in the writings of Emanuel Swedenborg, led his followers in a split from the Lutheran Church in 1785. He and his followers, who numbered in the several thousands, founded a group called the Harmony Society in Württemberg. After some harassment by the government there, Rapp had his followers pool all their resources and moved the group to Pennsylvania, where he founded the first in a series of communes and taught doctrines of pacifism, celibacy, German mysticism, and a belief in the imminent return of Christ. The first date that he gave for this return was September 15th, 1829. When Jesus did not appear, he lost a third of his followers. For the rest of his days, he insisted that Jesus would return within his lifetime, and even as he lay dying in 1847, he maintained that insistence before finally being proven dead wrong. But not all early millennialist sects in America making predictions about the coming end times were imports. The earliest homegrown group I am aware of, the New Israelites of Vermont, led by Nathaniel Wood, were active in the late 1700s, and this fascinating early U.S. millenarian group connects in their beliefs to many topics I've just talked about on the podcast, as well as a favorite topic of mine that tends to come up time and time again. First, Nathaniel Wood, their prophet, who had been excommunicated from the Congregationalist Church, probably for his claims of revelation, asserted that he and his followers were the literal descendants of the lost tribes of Israel, a topic that I spoke about in great detail in a series some years ago. In fact, claiming to be descended from the lost tribes or to be the quote-unquote real Israelites is a topic I have had to revisit since it is common of a lot of radical hate groups. Wood's followers also believed in alchemical lore, which I have also spoken a great deal about, and preached that Hebrew was the divine language, something I just spoke about in the last episode. Perhaps the most prominent characteristic of this group, though, is that they practiced dowsing, not for water, but for money, using divining rods in their revelatory practices, and to hunt for buried treasure, a confidence game and fraud that, as I discussed in my recent patron-exclusive minisode about dowsing, became exceedingly common in turn of the 19th century America. So closely were Wood's New Israelites associated with the use of divining rods that they became known as the Fraternity of Rodsmen. But they are remembered more for their apocalyptic prediction, which led to a violent conflict with the authorities. Wood predicted that in 1802, a quote-unquote destroying angel would appear, kicking off the apocalypse, and his rodsmen would inherit the earth. Their prediction led many to believe the group planned some violence, and therefore the militia gathered. When the New Israelites also gathered for the predicted day, the militia actually fired muskets on them to disperse what they considered to be a mob, an incident that came to be known as the Wood Scrape. After this day of violence and disappointment, when the predicted angel never appeared, Wood left Vermont and his group disbanded. But there's a good reason to believe that his little millennialist cult had a huge influence on the religious landscape of America as a potential inspiration of Mormonism. Many who knew him later claimed that Joseph Smith Sr., the father of the founder of Mormonism, was himself a leading rodsman, as was the father of Oliver Cowdery, the scribe with whom Joseph Jr. would eventually claim to translate and dictate his Book of Mormon. And Joseph Smith Jr. was a money-digger con man, like his Dowser father, long before he was a supposed prophet, as I spoke about in my recent minisode. In fact, so many of the central ideas of Mormonism, about the 10 lost tribes of Israel having traveled to the New World, about angelic visitation and plans to restore Zion by building a temple, can all be seen in this predecessor cult. Joseph Smith Jr. even experimented with predicting the apocalypse himself at a few points, telling his apostles in 1835 that the Lord would come in 56 years, and claiming in 1843 that he'd heard the voice of God telling him the second coming would occur when he reached the age of 85. This would place his prediction around 1890 or 1891. But unlike Wood, he didn't live to see his prediction proven wrong, as he died in a hail of musket balls in 1844.
Now for a brief intermission.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
AI is incredible. It can teach you how to fry an egg and even write a poem, pirate style. Yarr! But it knows nothing about your work. Slackbot is different. It doesn't just know the facts, it knows your schedule. It can turn a brainstorm into a brief, and it doesn't need to be taught. Because Slackbot isn't just another AI, it's AI that knows your work as well as you do. Visit slack.com/meet Slackbot to learn more.
Step into your future with an all-new series, Star Trek Starfleet Academy.
Being a cadet means being open to the people around you.
I've spent my whole life getting away from stuff, letting someone in. It's hard.
I want to be captain. I need to be captain.
Holly Hunter and Paul Giamatti star.
You'll encounter challenges your predecessors never had to imagine.
Starfleet Academy. New series now streaming on Paramount+.
Now, back to the show.
This development, from the continuing ecstatic activities of the Shakers after Mother Ann's death to the wood scrape and the birth of Mormonism, must all be viewed as part of a larger religious revival across the U.S. called the Second Great Awakening. The First Great Awakening saw the beginning of evangelicalism in Britain and America, focusing on personal transformative religious experience and the missionary conversion of others. While this second revival in the late 18th and early 19th centuries focused more on the encouragement of free will and personal piety, with emotional appeals that resulted in ecstatic mass conversions. This was the era of tent revivals, led by schismatic fringe religious figures, especially in Western and Central New York, a region that came to be called the Burned Over District because of the revivalism in the area. The preacher synonymous with the revivals in this area was Charles Grandison Finney, and his doctrines of abolition and gender equality were certainly radical for the time. Finney's ministry demonstrates that not all movements in the Burned Over District were focused on millennialist predictions, but others were. Take, for example, Jemima Wilkinson, who led a Quaker splinter sect in Western New York, calling herself the Universal Public Friend, preaching free will, abolition, and women's rights like Finney, but also celibacy like Ann Lee, and the imminence of Judgment Day like George Rapp and Nathaniel Wood. Like many in that time and place, including Ann Lee, Wilkinson took New England's dark day to be a sign of the fulfillment of prophecy. I've spoken about this event in the past, more fully in a patron exclusive, but the dark day was a natural darkening of the daytime sky in New England in 1780, likely due to smoke from a forest fire. It caused many to believe that the Day of Judgment was at hand, and even today, Seventh-day Adventists debate the religious significance of that darkness. And here we find ourselves brought, rather organically, to one of the most prominent of millennialist movements arising out of burned-over district revivalism and made famous for failed predictions of the Second Coming, the movement that would eventually evolve into the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the Millerites. Born into a Massachusetts Baptist farming family with a Revolutionary War veteran father, William Miller ended up becoming a Vermont sheriff in his 20s and fighting in the War of 1812 in his 30s. Seeing American naval victory over the superior British forces at the Battle of Pittsburgh as a miracle, he returned to New England and became an obsessive lay minister, with an especial focus on the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation, the biblical fuel for most millennialist end times predictions. In the 1830s, he began preaching and publishing articles declaring that he had deciphered some symbolical passages that I won't waste time explaining here, and had determined that the Second Coming would occur in 1843. Eventually, interest in his theory surged across New England, especially in the burned-over district, as tracts summarizing his claims were circulated far and wide, and Miller himself went on a lecture tour, speaking in hundreds of churches and tent revivals, where sometimes skeptics threw rotten eggs at him and accused him of spreading a hysteria. Undeterred, he published a book in 1838, and soon his predictions became a national movement, with one early devotee launching a newspaper called Signs of the Times to disseminate them. As the 1840s dawned, the number of Millerite publications exploded to almost 50, and his followers, widely dispersed though they may have been, numbered more than 50,000. Pressure to name an exact date was extreme, but Miller only asserted that it would happen sometime after March 21st and no later than the same date the following year, thereby extending the date into 1844. As we heard with even the most recent failed predictions, some Millerites reportedly neglected their households and farms, or even sold everything they owned ahead of the predicted return of Christ, when they expected to be taken to heaven, and some even waited on their roofs or climbed to mountaintops to meet Jesus with open arms. So, when Jesus, perhaps the least reliable visitor in history, was a no-show, they were understandably very distraught. Miller urged patience and recalculated, claiming that actually the arrival time was in October. But when the prediction failed again, many left the fold and abandoned Miller's teachings once and for all. The event, or rather non-event, was dubbed the Great Disappointment. But it wasn't the end for Millerism, as some remaining inveterate believers in his interpretations of prophecy simply suggested that he was right about the date, just wrong about it being the date of Christ's return to earth. Rather, grasping at straws, they claimed that in 1844 Jesus had entered a quote-unquote heavenly sanctuary in preparation for his second coming, and that the time of his return, while imminent, remained unknown. This group founded the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which even today continues to publish the Millerite newspaper, The Signs of the Times. To give some sense of continuity between Millerism and millennialist cults of modern times, in 1929 the Davidian Seventh-day Adventists were formed as a schismatic breakaway. In 1955, a further split occurred when the Branch Davidians were formed, and in 1987, one Vernon Howell took control of the Branch Davidians, remaking himself as a messianic forerunner of the imminent second coming and calling himself David Koresh, leading up to the eventual tragedy at the group's Waco compound. The Mormons and the Seventh-day Adventists are not the only modern American churches whose roots can be traced back to failed millennialist predictions of the Second Coming. In fact, another major church founded on such a prediction can also, much like the Branch Davidians, be traced back to Adventism and thus to Millerism. This group was founded by Charles Taze Russell, whose claims about the pyramids I spoke about in some depth in my long series called Pyramidiacy. Raised in the second half of the 19th century in Pennsylvania by an Irish immigrant father who owned a Pittsburgh haberdashery, he left his parents' Presbyterian church at a young age, tried a Congregationalist church, and became disenchanted with the doctrines of eternal punishment and predestination common of major Christian denominations. His faith was not renewed until 1870, when at 18 years old he attended an Adventist Bible study. These meetings were led by Second Adventists, who in the wake of the Great Disappointment sought to adapt and carry on Millerite teachings, and Russell was most taken with their assertions that major Christian doctrines were not supported by scriptural texts, and that this could be established through deep study of the Bible. 10 years later, Russell broke away from Adventism, but this notion that lay students of the scriptures could reinterpret the Bible and discern errors in Christian dogma became a foundational concept of the movement he formed, called the Bible Student Movement. Like Miller before him, Russell studied and reinterpreted biblical texts obsessively, and in 1881 founded the Watchtower and Tract Society, focusing, also like Miller, on spreading his theories and interpretations through widespread publication. Fascinatingly, he claimed that the second coming of Christ had already occurred in 1874, but that it was, quote-unquote, invisible. His prediction for the commencement of the end times was 1914, a date that he supported through archaeoastronomy, pointing to the measurements of the pyramids as additional proofs of what was to come. Like many millennialists then and now, he believed that the restoration of Jews to Israel was a prerequisite for the end times, and that in 1914, a worldwide war on this restored Israel would result in the destruction of all nations. Unlike some other millennialist leaders, Russell lived to see he had been wrong, as by 1914, the modern state of Israel had not yet been created. However, when major world powers were drawn into the First World War that summer, he was satisfied that he had predicted Armageddon correctly and died 2 years later, certain that the end of days had begun. After his death, the Watchtower Society adopted the name Jehovah's Witnesses, and the church known as such today has evolved over the course of several schisms, adapting its core doctrines to suit the unfolding of history. Now they come around knocking on your door, and they typically don't like to talk about how their creed was founded on interpretations of the Bible and predictions of doom that have time and time again been proven wrong. This has become a typical feature of American evangelical churches, with all kinds of tortured reasoning being used to work out predictions of the second coming. In the 50s, yet another movement within Seventh-day Adventism came to believe that since the Gospel of Matthew says, quote, "As it was in the days of Noah, so will it be when the Son of Man comes," end quote. And because Noah preached for 120 years, according to Genesis, and 120 years from Miller's 1844 Great Disappointment was 1964, and that somehow meant the second coming would be in 1964. Obviously, they got that one wrong too. And in the 70s and 80s, amidst the right-wing politicization of American Christianity and the rise of the Satanic Panic, these popular predictions came with greater frequency and seeming authority. Hal Lindsey, whom I spoke about recently as contributing to the satanic panic with his book Satan is Alive and Well on Planet Earth, wrote in his book on end times prophecy, The Late Great Planet Earth, that Jesus would return by 1988. Edgar Whisenant, a NASA engineer with an interest in prophecy, applied numerology and all kinds of strange reasoning to make Lindsey's argument more precise, publishing 88 reasons why the rapture will be in 1988, and then, in 1989, amending his prediction and publishing The Final Shout, Rapture Report 1989, suggesting it would instead be that year. And he just kept going. In 1993, he published 23 Reasons Why a Pre-Tribulation Rapture Looks Like It Will Occur on Rosh Hashanah 1993. And when that failed, he published And Now the Earth's Destruction by Fire, Nuclear Bomb Fire, predicting the end of the world in 1994. As had happened in The Great Disappointment, some who believed Whisenant sold all their belongings ahead of his predicted dates for the rapture. Like a good Christian expecting to be taken up to heaven at any moment, one believer in North Carolina barricaded himself in his home and shot at innocent passersby. Jerry Falwell, founder of the Moral Majority, suggested the rapture was coming sometime after 1999, and Ed Dobson, a former executive in Falwell's organization, preached to his megachurch and published a book about the end of the world coming in the year 2000. What with all the anxiety over Y2K, the fact that many were expecting the rapture and Armageddon was a bit overshadowed. After that, now well into the 21st century with no Jesus in sight, Harold Camping, the owner of a Christian radio network, who had previously promoted Whisenant's date of 1994 for the rapture, began convincing many that it was coming in 2011. Meanwhile, another sect leader, Ronald Wineland, head of a splinter movement from televangelist Herbert Armstrong's Worldwide Church of God, took up Camping's fallen banner, moved the date from 2011 to 2012, and then to 2013, when it just kept not happening. Wineland was arrested and imprisoned for tax evasion, but when he got out, he went right back to it, claiming Jesus would return in 2019. And in the meanwhile, we'd had Pastor Mark Biltz and televangelist John Hagee making a series of failed predictions relating to some lunar eclipses that occurred in 2014 and 2015 and happened to line up with Jewish holidays. Their claim, called the Blood Moon Prophecy, asserted that Christ would return during the 2015 lunar eclipse. But nope. Sheesh, where was this guy? He's making all his followers look bad by not showing himself when they say he will. So we see Malakela was only the most recent of Christians to make a failed millennialist prediction about the rapture, the second coming, or the end of the world. And in my view, all of these failed predictions, which will surely just keep being made and continue to go unfulfilled, are just further proof that armchair theologists and door-knocking evangelists and street corner sign-carrying doomsayers don't really know what they're talking about, no matter how confidently they spew their beliefs. Thanks for listening to Historical Blindness. As always, special thanks go out to my partner patrons, Diane Lane, Joe Escott, Devlin Hoff, Lisa, Prickly Pear, Fred R. Grotice, Robin Naggett, Don Mundus, Eunice Allen Bradley, Juliette O'Connor, Jonathan Williams, Joshua Luddington, Christine LeBlanc, Lonnie C., Kaylee, Ama, Christopher L. Burton, Benny Slater, Chris, Jocelyn Clausen, Lindsay McAllister, Brian, Jamie Nielsen, Martin Robistow, Josh Haberman, and AJ. To you faithful patrons, I will share my prediction that some other Christian prophecy nut will claim the rapture is about to happen within the next 5 years. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows, like The Constant and Who Did What Now. Some music on this episode was licensed through a Blue Dot Sessions blanket license at the time of the episode's publication. Additional music is by Kai Engel, licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution license. Check out the show notes for a list of the tracks used. You can support the show by pledging on Patreon or by making a one-time donation on PayPal. Find those links in the show notes or find me on Venmo at Historical Blindness. Until the next End Times prediction, remember, we already have a few we're waiting on. In 2007, eccentric physicist Frank Tipler, who had already unconvincingly claimed to have scientifically proven the existence of God, predicted the second coming would be in 2057. And that's not so far from polymath Isaac Newton's prediction that it will occur in 2060. Therefore, in another 30 years or so, you can probably expect some more religious fanaticism for sure.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.
Carvana's so easy. Just a click and we've got ourselves a car. See?
So many cars. That's a click-tastic inventory.
And check out the financing options. Payments to fit our budget. I mean, that's
Clickonomics 101.
Delivery to our door.
Just a hop, skip, and a click away.
And bought.
No better feeling than when everything just clicks. Buy your car today on
Carvana.
Delivery fees may apply.